The sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty plains of North Africa as we marched through the arid landscape. I was an Italian soldier, part of the Regio Esercito, fighting alongside our German allies in the North African campaign. It was 1942, and we were deep in the Sahara, pushing toward the British-held town of El Alamein. The desert was unforgiving. The heat was unbearable, and the sand seemed to get everywhere into our food, our water, even our weapons. Our uniforms were soaked with sweat, and the constant thirst was a torment that never left us. But we pressed on, driven by orders and the hope that victory would bring an end to this hellish war. Our morale had been shaken by the British counterattacks. They fought fiercely, and their tanks were superior to ours. We had suffered heavy losses, and supplies were running low, but we were soldiers, and we had a job to do. We moved forward, step by painful step, under the blazing sun. One morning, just after dawn, we received word that the British were preparing for a major assault. We dug in, using whatever we could find to fortify our positions: rocks, sandbags, even pieces of wrecked vehicles. The air was thick with tension as we waited for the attack to come. When it did, it was like a thunderclap. The British artillery opened up, pounding our positions with a relentless barrage. The ground shook beneath us, and the noise was deafening. We crouched in our foxholes, praying that the shells would miss us. The minutes felt like hours as the bombardment went on and on. Finally, the shelling stopped, and we knew what was coming next. The British tanks appeared on the horizon, their engines roaring as they advanced. Our anti-tank guns fired, but many of our shots bounced off their thick armor. We opened fire with our rifles and machine guns, but it felt like trying to stop a tidal wave with a handful of pebbles. The battle was brutal. The British tanks rolled over our positions, crushing everything in their path. We fought desperately, but we were outgunned and outnumbered. My comrades fell around me, one by one, their cries drowned out by the noise of battle. I remember the dust, the smoke, and the chaos all around me. At some point I was hit. I don't know if it was a bullet or shrapnel, but the pain was sharp and sudden. I fell to the ground, clutching my side, as the world spun around me. I could hear the shouts of my comrades, the roar of the tanks, and the distant thud of artillery. I tried to get up, but my legs wouldn't move. The battle continued to rage around me as I lay there, helpless. As the day wore on, the sounds of battle began to fade. I must have lost consciousness at some point because when I woke up, the sun was setting, and the battlefield was eerily quiet. The British had moved on, leaving behind the wreckage of war, burned-out tanks, craters, and the bodies of the fallen. I was alive, but just barely. I managed to drag myself to a makeshift aid station, where a few of our medics were tending to the wounded. They patched me up as best they could, but I knew I was lucky to be alive. Many of my comrades had not been so fortunate. As night fell, I lay on the ground, staring up at the stars. The desert was quiet now, a stark contrast to the chaos of the day. I thought about home, about the mountains of Italy, the cool air, and the smell of pine trees. I wondered if I would ever see them again. The war had taken so much from us, our friends, our strength, and our hope. All we had left was the will to survive, and even that was fading. The next day, we were ordered to retreat. The British had won the battle, and we had no choice but to fall back. As we trudged through the sand, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of defeat. We had fought bravely, but it hadn't been enough. The desert had claimed another victory, and we were left to pick up the pieces.